Welcome. We'll give it a couple more minutes to the ASQ LED webinar. I'm going to give it about a minute or two, make sure everybody else can get on by noon. Thank you for joining.
Ellen, are you there?
Yeah, everyone.
Okay. Yeah. Everyone else is muted? Or
No. All right, let's get started. It's almost noon. Welcome again to the ASQ Lean Enterprise Division webinar that we hold each month, and they are free to members. Just a couple housekeeping items to go over. First of all, I'm Ellen Ermer, and I'm the webinar chair for the LED ASQ section. Our webinars are recorded, so all previous webinars, as well as this one, will be available on the ASQ Lean Enterprise Division YouTube channel. Also, you are all on mute, so feel free, though, to post questions, and I'm going to show you in a little bit where to post those questions, so that our speaker today has reserved about 10 minutes at the end of this session to answer your questions. And as a reminder, you will also receive a certificate of attendance automatically 24 hours after this webinar, so that you can use that for RU credit. This is what the certificate's going to look like, just so you're familiar. You're going to see something from post ASQ RD, and that'll give you some information on the webinar you attended, as well as how to get your certificate. And then as we walk through this, as I said, through this webinar, or go through this webinar, if you have questions, you'll notice on the right-hand side of your screen, there's a bar, and if you can just click on the drop-down arrow for questions and write questions in there, I will pay attention to those and keep track of those, and then at the end of the session, we will pose those to Beau for answers. Just a reminder that our next webinar will be Wednesday, June 10th, and the topic will be Howard Zwick on lean and safety. They have more in common than you think. And so it is my pleasure now to introduce you to Beau Keyte. He's a faculty member and instructor in a curriculum for the curriculum, excuse me, I'm not saying this very, He is a faculty member and instructor in the Lean Enterprise Institute, as well as the University of Dayton and the Shingo Price Institute. He's a co-author of multiple journal articles and prize-winning books. And many of you may know him. He's been, I would consider him a lean guru, and he's been in the lean world and world for many, many years. So I am very pleased to have him present for LED. And with that, I am going to change the presenting over to Beau.
Great.
Thank you, Beau.
Okay, thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm going to show me first. This is actually an experiment of my own to see if I can flip back and forth between the PowerPoint slides and me, so you don't fall asleep just watching the PowerPoint slides. I tried it out with Helen yesterday. It seems like it might work, and so let's give it a shout. This webinar is probably only going to be more like 40 minutes long, in part because I'm not trying to teach you deep tools. I'm trying to frame a conversation and suggest an alternative model and demonstrate that model. So it's kind of a little bit different, and I'm hoping that we have a robust discussion afterwards. Let's see. I'm assuming that my PowerPoint just came up. The title of this webinar is Scaling Change. And it's a topic that we don't really read a lot about or talk about. At least I haven't seen that. And I think it's an incredibly important topic, especially today. So it's time to put it at the head of the table and say, hey, regardless of what's going to happen post-pandemic, how are we thinking about continuing with change? And then, if appropriate, how do we scale change much better than we do now? So I have a short agenda. I'd like to check some numbers and some assumptions on our current way of supporting change, and then talk about changing the approach to supporting change, to scaling change, and then rolling it out, meaning what's your role if you choose to roll it out, and then have some Q&A. With that being said, let's go a little bit more into what I've seen as a typical support role. Not necessarily yours, but what I typically see is when I walk into an organization, we have good folks like you inside a continuous improvement department of some type, and there's one expert assigned per team, whatever that project team is or that improvement team is. There could be more teams in a project, and so there could be one or more of you assigned to it, depending on what your capacity is. But one way or another, there's always someone assigned to a team. And as a result of that, you working with a team, you get best practice or results that are pretty cool, and you make them available to all. So that's basically the design that I'm challenging. So as we move forward, we'll do the progression of great work. And we start off by saying, hey, somebody important gives you a call. And they say, hey, we have a problem. Fine, I think I can help. And your next activity is to find a team. And then you work with this team, and they create some really cool results, which in turn creates you blowing the horn and shouting out the best practices that have just been achieved. So that's a thumbnail sketch of what I see as a typical engagement, which is great. It really is great. In fact, it's time to celebrate. We always have a celebration at the end of a great engagement. But that also creates more demand, because that celebration leads to lots of people talking about, hey, look at the good work you've done. We have some issues too, and maybe we need your help. And all of a sudden, there are lots of phone calls coming in. And as a result, you never say no. And you have lots of teams who in turn do lots of good stuff, which in turn goes to some real superheroes sounding the horn saying, look at these best practices everywhere. Isn't this great? Now, I applaud you. That's not really my real concern. My concern is the math, because as you accelerate that, all of a sudden you have teams everywhere, superheroes everywhere, and what's actually occurred. So in this mode, we're actually wondering about how do we scale? Because every good project has a rollout from a pilot to some other areas. That requires resources. Every good project is noticed by others to say, hey, I want my own project and something else that I have a problem with has nothing to do with your rollout. And so you fund that with resources, and they have rollouts. And all of a sudden, this thing starts just exploding in front of you, and you need to hire lots of people. And taken to the extreme, you could say that, yeah, we could scale, but we need about 10% of the employment base inside this company, inside this department. We need 10% of our employees to be us. And then we know how to do it all the way around the company. And that's never happened. It probably never will happen. And it turns out it's just a bad design. So I realize that most of you are frustrated with not having enough capacity to deal with the current demands you have, much less thinking about how do we really roll this out. So that's what I want to challenge. And I want to challenge first, let me see if I can get back here. Show screen. Where is my PowerPoint? Ellen, do you see my PowerPoint?
We can see it.
Really? I can't. All right, fine. Well, so much for my experiment. How is it, guys? I hope you're enjoying it. I may not do that again because I can't see my PowerPoint. So let me see how to do this. There it is. Okay. So let's pull over for an assumption check. I want to check some assumptions here that are really critical in thinking about how do we scale change. The first two, these are the only ones I want to challenge. There's lots of assumptions in this model. These are the only three I want to challenge, rather. Two of them are social. The first one is the best practice we created will be automatically embraced by everybody. The second one is also social. The best practice will also be a best fit and a best performance wherever we take it. And the third one's more technical in terms of we need folks like you to teach and support each and every team we create. Those three I want to challenge. First, in terms of being embraced, there are three different models to roll out, or three different clarions to roll out the best practice to other areas. It doesn't matter whether it's you on the left or an external consultant in the middle or the A team from the department on the right. You are all viewed the same by those you're telling, I have an answer to your problems. The reason is you really don't know what their problems are. All you know is what the A team came up with. And they have to embrace someone else telling me how to work. And I would actually go back to you and say, when's the last time you had an organizational change and you were doing great work? And somebody comes back in and says, hey, I'm new here. You must have been doing great work, but I need you to do it my way now because I've been successful doing something else. I bet you've been in that position, and how does it make you feel? And when you present this to other people who weren't part of that thinking and that solution, that's how they feel too. So this is a gap in engaging with people. The next one, next assumption is best practice is an automatic best fit except for variations. Oh my God, we have variations everywhere. You go to roll this thing out, there's variations of capabilities and resource mix, access to the computer, a culture. There's all sorts of variations. How is it possible that the best practice is an automatic best fit? My own experience, it has never been a best fit. It's only a best practice where it's created because it has all those variations. It's designed to its own variations of capabilities, resource mix, IT access, culture, etc. You move it out of there, it's a different ball game. It's in a foreign country. The last one is in dedicated continuous improvement professionals. And my question to you is, how many of you were always quality professionals forever, since the day you walked out of college? And if not, who taught you? And I'm guessing that once you were taught, you were pretty good. So you were asked to join the quality team. And I'm wondering if it's possible to not do that. If it's possible for you to be taught and not move to the quality team. And that's really what I want to get down to in this model. So it's time to tell a story. This part is an experiment in scaling change with fixed capacity. We're not hiring anybody else, and we're going to scale like crazy. And the subtitle is Migrating from Spreading the Best Practice to Spreading the Best Thinking. So my story starts probably about 10 years ago in the state of Michigan. I'm in Ann Arbor, and one of our clients at the time was the Michigan Hospital Association, who approached us and said, listen, is it possible for you to help all the hospitals of the state at the same time improve patient flow in emergency rooms? And for those of you who have ever been a consultant, or for those of you who are internal consultants, Think of having 62 clients at the same time and how you would deal with that. But they had a mission. So we said, sure. And they wanted to improve the patient flow in emergency rooms. So there were some constraints. The first was hospital resources. No hospital could give up more than 3 people to work on this. So their A team was 3 people. And I'll give you a hint on ERs, there are 27 shifts in an emergency room. And we have 3 people representing 27 shifts. Now, you can work several different shifts. They're not 27 distinct sets of people, but the 27 shifts. The second was a client budget. MHA didn't have that much money. They couldn't give us money to go on site anywhere. We had to do it off site. And the third was the most egregious to me. The ER process is complex. It's a mini hospital in itself. So how do you get in front of them and teach them and get them to move? The staffs are resistant to people coming in and telling them what to do. The staffs are resistant giving up their time to make change. They're busy. So don't even think about best practices. It ain't going to work there. In fact, it's failed. Best practices in hospitals in general fail, especially in places like the ER. So we had a hypothesis for our experiment. We can create real change with a few frontline staff members who lead an effort to improve flow and reduce patient waiting in the ER, and with only a few consultants like me. So we had one big experiment, the state of Michigan, and 62 smaller experiments, one for each hospital, and we had metrics. The big experiment for the state was the ability for the hospitals to think, not just act, and to find out if we could approach the hospitals of Michigan through a different model of teaching. The hospitals had metrics also. They had 2. One was the reduced length of stay, which is basically lead time for those of you not in the healthcare industry. And the other one was reduced defects. And this is a defect called left without being seen in an ER. When the patient waits so long in the ER, in the waiting room, they get tired and walk out. They leave. That's a defect because that patient could be hurtful. They could need help. So it's actually in unsafe condition when someone who might be critically ill leaves. Now, the cool thing about this was that we decided that they didn't have to look at the same scope. They could take any scope they wanted as long as it impacts the metrics. So some people took from the time the patient arrived to the time it hit triage, the patient hit triage. Some people took from end to end. Some people looked at the turnaround time from radiology. Wherever they thought there would be an opportunity, given their expertise in their own specific hospital, where did they think they could see real improvements in reducing the length of stay and left without being seen? So that is cool because of our assumption best practice will be a best fit everywhere. We did not want to give a best practice for triage or radiology turnaround. We wanted them to figure out what they wanted to do because each hospital was different in terms of capabilities, resource mix, demographics, etc. So let them figure it out as long as they meet the goal. So with that in mind, we created a methodology, and this will get complex. So I need to go slowly with you on this so you understand and don't get confused by the graphics. I'll start out by the split in the screen now. We had 2 ways of teaching in this methodology, and it's separated by a dashed line. The first one is at the top, called the cohort level. A cohort is a region, all the hospitals in a region. There are 7 regions. The Upper Peninsula was a region. They had 6 hospitals. Southeast Michigan, basically Detroit, was a region. They had 13 hospitals. So the cohort could be 6 hospitals or 13 hospitals, all getting together as one. Each one of those is a cohort. And then there's a hospital team where those 3 people who attend the cohort, that they're the A team, go back and teach the hospital teams the other 27 shifts. So those are the two levels. And this is how we went about doing it. First, the effort was over 9 months. We didn't have any idea what the length of time should be. So we picked one meeting a month at the cohort level, and we had 9 meetings. So it was 9 months. We've since taken the same model and reduced it to 3 to 6 months, depending on the situation. But we started out with 9 because we didn't know any better. And here's how we did it. We started out at the cohort level, get everybody together in a room, and we're going to teach them something. Now, in this case, because it was a patient flow issue in the ER, we decided to use value stream mapping as a tool to progressively teach them how to improve on a value stream improvement project. So we get them together and we teach them something. And in this example, it shows that we taught them how to scope and how to draw a current state map. And then once they learned, they had to go back. But the key is the first word in that little red bubble, draft. Nothing they did in the room, it was a complete map, but it was a draft map because it was only the A team thinking about it, and there were 27 shifts who had to engage. So after the day of training, they went home and they put the map on the table or on the wall or wherever, and they found a way to reach out to as many people as they could in the ER staff to socialize it, saying, this is what we see in the current state. What do you see? So other people weren't being told the way it happened. They were being asked what happens. And as a result of that, they modified the current state map, and then they showed up again. They came back all together. All the hospitals came back together a month later. And the first thing they did was they shared their complete map with all the other hospitals. And in doing so, talked about the trials and tribulations of trying to get everyone together to A, get everyone together or reach out to everybody, and B, get some sort of agreement between all these feisty people. And they were learning from each other how to socialize better. At the end of that, we then taught them something else. And in this example shows a draft future state map. So they drew a future state map, but it was just draft. It was complete, but it was not final because they hadn't socialized. So they go back and say, hey, this is what we see, the A team sees as a future state map. What are your thoughts? And it took them a while to get through everyone. They modified it. They brought it back. They said, this is what we came up with. This was a social challenge and trying to get people together and agree on how we should act differently. And then we taught them how, in this example, how to design an experiment, and they drafted an experiment. Keyword once again is draft. They took it back, they socialized it, they changed it, and then they started to modify and run experiments. Now, you may know experiments as pilots. That's fine. So just erase experiments and put in pilots. That's basically the methodology. Where they get together as a cohort, they go back and socialize. They come back again, learn some more, go back. They come back, learn some more, go back. And by going back and forth, they were always synchronizing between what they were learning as a group of hospitals and what they thought they should be doing about it inside the staffs. So remember this assumption? Best practice will be embraced by all. Well, our best practice was never calling anything final when the A team left the room. But instead, the best practice was make sure you hear from everybody and modify your thinking. Here's a picture of teams in one region where they are reporting out what they did over the last month, and this person is talking about the work that evolved, what it looks like, and the challenges that their team had as they went through it. And the people in the crowd are representatives from different hospitals inside that region. So results. Everybody improved, some more than others, but everybody improved, all 62. We had 2 external consultants supporting 62 teams because we rewrote the book on how to teach and how people can learn. But we missed some stuff. We had engaged the leaders at the beginning, and the leaders said, yes, we will be engaged, and many of them fell away. And we didn't have the wherewithal to bring them back online. So we lived with the fact that many of them disengaged. We also never wrote the managers into this. So we were worried about changing the work of the ER, but we didn't address the management of that work. And we had no time for individual team coaching. So we got some cool stuff, but we had some other opportunities. At the end, we brought everyone to Dearborn, and we had storyboards for each hospital. And we had 62 tables of sharing when all the regions got together. It was incredibly cool. They were very proud and should have been. So, what are the benefits? Everyone was engaged. Everyone had their reality heard. Everyone was excited to try something. There was better thinking involved, better application, and more realistic, because it saw things that the A team never saw before and incorporated those ideas and experiences into the designs. The third one is critical about best practice. They had goals they met, but they had different solutions. They had different practices. So what was critical there is all you have to do is make sure they have the same goal. They can do anything they want in terms of a practice, as long as they hit the goal. And we also, the benefit was also sharing within staff and between teams, the hospital teams actually sped and enhanced the learning. They learned more about change as a result of this methodology. They learned more about what they were able to do. They learned more about how to change. They learned more about how to test and pilot it and make sure it works. So those are the 62 experiments. The big experiment worked. And so we went around and talked to the different hospitals to find out how things went. And these are their words, not mine. The methodology we used forced them to understand enough to teach others. It forced them to engage and listen to others, all 27 shifts. And it forced them to think differently about the pilots. Because when they ran a pilot, they'd run several iterations. They would put different people inside that pilot, inside the experiment. So they had lots and lots of people actually being scientists running an experiment. The best example was the University of Michigan Hospital. They had 95% of their staff, one way or another, participating in an experiment of all the experiments that they ran. 95% got a chance to try it on before they made it real. That was extraordinary. But the last bullet point's a quote, because I personally thought this would never work. It was so far out in left field. Like, are you kidding? We're going to just crash and burn. This is going to be terrible. And it worked. So whenever I got in front of a hospital afterwards, my biggest question was, how did you learn? And this was a direct quote, but others said something very similar. We learn more from each other than we learn from you. And I sat back and I realized I just received the biggest compliment of my life. So that changed my trajectory in terms of how to help clients scale change. Let's see, I don't know if I want to, let's see if I can try this again. Is the screen share stopped? I can't tell. Ellen?
Yes, you're on.
I can't tell. Okay, so we took it lots of places. We took it to lots of industries. So for healthcare, we were able to not just do value stream improvement projects, but also A3 processes where there was a progression of learning. So those are the only two we tried, but I think it works with any type of tool you use that requires progressive learning. I think it works like a charm. So we took it in healthcare, we took it in product development, we took it into managerial processes. We took it lots of places like that. And then we finally got around 4 or 5 years ago to changing the generation, to doing a new version. So I'm hoping you see this. If you can't, please screen. The next gen was looking at a legal office within an insurance company. And this is because in this insurance company, lawyers were in short supply, very specifically for their claims volume. And for those of you who don't know this about insurance companies, they employ lawyers to support you if you are insured by them and you are sued, because it's their money paying out. So they were short on lawyers, they couldn't hire enough, and they ended up outsourcing expensive cases to private firms. So they kept the easy ones, the ones they could settle, but the really hairy ones, the ones that get expensive and lots of time, they gave to expensive external counsel. It was costing them a bunch of money. They had 12 field offices, and they trained 3 of them at a time. So it was sequential, and they trained 3 at a time. So let me show the screen again and go here. Here are the office locations. They're spread around the country, and we took 3 at a time. And they had some goals. They wanted to increase their actual cases inside their field offices by 20%. They wanted to increase in-house retention to 70. So there's a difference. They could run more cases through, but still outsource them. They wanted to retain at least 70%. They wanted to maintain or improve customer satisfaction. And they also wanted to improve employee engagement. What I learned later was that the legal staff was at the bottom of the barrel in employee engagement inside this company. They were the worst in their annual surveys. And they also wanted deeper learning and a faster rollout. So I'm sharing some stuff with you early on just to show what they were able to do, and I'll get into the details of the cohort. Their baseline is in red. Their goal was 20%. And 15 months in, they're at 29%, which is pretty cool. This is for the first cohort.
I'm going to interrupt. Oh, this is Ellen. I'm going to interrupt for a minute. For some reason, I don't think the slides are moving forward. We're looking at redesigning the model, the next generation.
Oh. Let me stop. Just a second.
Thank you.
All right, is anything clicking?
No.
Are you frozen? No?
No, it's saying it redesigning the model.
Okay, so why don't you grab share back and we'll pass it back to me. So let me stop share. Stop share. Sorry, guys. Can you grab share back?
Okay, I can, but.
Okay.
All right.
Now give it back to me.
Okay.
Let's reboot it, see if it works. And I won't be fancy this time. I'll just stay right here. I don't think my experiment's working out very well. So what do you see now?
Redesigning the model, the next generation.
Okay. Did it just forward?
Outside.
Okay. Yes? Yes, Ellen?
Yes, it switched. It's now onto office.
Okay. All right. So here are the office locations. And here were the goals: to increase throughput by 20%, increase in-house retention to 70, improve the customer satisfaction and employee engagement. As I just said, the employee engagement was at the bottom of the barrel inside the company. So these are the results early on. I wanted to share this before I showed you the actual methodology. Before their current state was 100% in red. Their throughput wanted to go up by 20%, and after 15 months they went up by 29%. So that's way better than they thought would happen early on. On the right, there's additional cases. They insourced around 30 cases per location of the snarly ones. So they took expensive legal fees, external legal fees out of the system, $2 million per field office per year. And that's just the first 3, and they're just beginning. So it was extraordinary. Also, in terms of customer satisfaction, they didn't have a great metric for this because they're dealing with thousands of insured. So they had an anecdotal one or a surrogate one where they were looking at the positive feedback improve as they solved the cases quicker. So they're looking at comments and attaboys and stuff that had a big uptick and figured, well, we made a difference. In terms of the employee engagement, they went from the bottom of the barrel to the top, the best in the company, the next time the survey was taken. So this is a huge transformation. And just think about how they were, the concept of scaling and what they were learning to do. So let's talk about the model. Let's go back to this. This is where you guys might be now. And it's where this company did not want to be. So we took one cohort at a time. Remember, for the hospitals, we took 7 at a time. Now we're taking 1 at a time. And it's just 3 field offices. So in this graphic on the left, you see 3 tables, 3 teams. But we operated the same way. We would teach them something, and then each one would go back to the right and teach the field office level. So we went back and forth between the cohort level and the office level. Same model you saw for the hospitals. Nothing's different. But at the end of the first 3, here's what's significant for me. I left. That's me on the upside. I'm actually leaving the group because they've learned enough to proceed. There were 2 internal consultants I trained at the time, and they learned enough to carry on for the following 3 cohorts. So I was gone, and then they stepped up. And in addition to them stepping up, the cohort acted differently. These 3 field offices knew that they were the alphas, and they knew who was being teed up next. So during the cohort, they took it upon themselves to reach out to the other 3 field offices and start sharing. Say, hey, this is what's going on. This is what we're learning. This is what we're thinking about. So they were actually prepping the next cohort to come in more prepared than them. And that was pretty cool. And then, so the next cohort proceeds, finishes it, and they also logged in their experiment designs, their pilots, and the visuals they're now using to manage their process. So cohort 3 comes around, they do the same thing. They reach out to the next sequence, the next 3 that are triggered, and they start talking to them, and they start sharing their experiments with them. And they start doing all this talking. So cohort 3 gets pretty excited. They start doing their own research and doing some cool things on their own because they're reaching out to them, and they're logging in. Cohorts 1 and 2 are logging in their visuals and their experiments, and cohort 3 is looking at them ahead of time. Say, oh, look what they're trying to do. Look what succeeded. Look what didn't succeed. This is really interesting. So that was cool. And then, so they were sharing all around. And then what was amazing, so here's the real cool piece of this entire model. By the time they got to the last field offices, the internal consultants were stepping back, and they were letting the field office staff from the other cohorts do the teaching. So all of a sudden, the staff weren't traveling all the time. They're at home because they had enough capability inside the other cohorts to teach the 4th. And that model took off like wildfire. I just talked to somebody yesterday about this team, and they told me that still maybe 3 years later, probably 3 years ago, the legal staff is by far ahead of anybody else. They're the gold standard for how they scaled change. And they not only stopped with their initial project, they continue to find other opportunities to work on and other processes to work on inside their legal processes. So this did not happen. Now, a couple of things that they did do, they're still talking to each other. They are still collaborating. They're doing conference calls. They have buddy offices. So if they have a problem, they do not call the initial consultants, the internal consultants. They don't call you. They call each other, and they learn from each other. The managers are meeting together. There's regional meetings all the time to constantly talk about what they're trying to change, where they're changing it, sharing experiments, stealing from each other if they choose to, and moving forward. So it's an amazing model. I've not seen anything this good in the collaboration, which is why I wanted to share it with you. Now, on to role changing. That's you. If you want to roll it out, there's a few things to worry about. The first is your client has lots of energy and lots of capabilities. Use that energy to have them find a way to learn and share together, not you. If you put the model on the table, saying what's the best way for you to go back, what do you need, and how are you going to do it? Socialization is actually a process. Let's design a process for reaching out and hearing everyone's thoughts. The second is a role change specific to you. Most of you could be lead thinker and team leader, and that doesn't have the same place anymore because they're thinking by themselves and they're learning to lead. But what they need help with is teaching, facilitating, and coaching. So you actually elevate yourselves to a higher level consultant by teaching, facilitating, and coaching. And in doing so, you take your really capable organization and you leverage your scarce resources. Scarce resources you, because you don't have enough capacity to deal with all the projects on all those phone calls you get all the time. The next bullet point is once you teach them, keep them there. Leave them in their expertise and let them teach others. So if you're interested in trying this, I will share something from Jeff Hasty. Jeff Hasty just retired in January from, I believe, almost a lifelong career at Beau's Corporation. Beau's are the guys who make the headphones and the speakers and everything. Jeff was the only full-time employee in continuous improvement for a global company. And they do great stuff in terms of process improvement. And the way he kept it just him and didn't have to create a big staff is whenever he had a phone call and whenever he answered the phone, someone said, "Jeff, I need help." His first response was, "Okay, who am I going to train to do what I do?" And if they didn't have an answer, Jeff wouldn't help them. So this might be something you want to try with your next phone call. Who am I going to train to do what I do? Which puts a very different flavor on that conversation. It becomes a collaboration and discussion about how to expand the mental muscle or the capabilities inside your client organization, as opposed to just seeing you as the one running in with an answer. So that's the end. I'm ending early. I hoped I would end early because I'm thinking you guys are probably zoomed out after 8 weeks from working at home or working with Zoom meetings, and I want to give you a little mental break. So I will be glad to entertain any questions you might have, and let's see if I can.
Let me, Beau,
Yes.
thank you. One of the first questions that has come through is back to your healthcare example. How did you introduce the value stream map in the beginning of your engagement, and were there struggles introducing the map, and how did you overcome those struggles? Anybody else with questions, please post those and I will read them to
Yeah.
Beau.
So the value stream map, well, we used our methodology of teaching value stream mapping. I'll be blunt with you. And so we had them, the easiest way I've found to introduce mapping is to get them mapping on a case study. So we have a very simple case study. I'm more than willing to share it with you that we use, and we run them through that case study saying, please draw a map of this after we teach them the basics, draw a map of this before we have them draw their own map. So they use the case study to get used to mapping, and then they can then easily draw their own map, and they drew to the best of their abilities with what they knew because of the basically a cross-functional, those 3 people in each team were cross-functional. They didn't have the same role. So they could speak or opine for what seemed to happen on the map. And there were gaps. There were times when the team said, well, something happens here, but I'm not sure because we don't have anybody from that specialization here. Like, I don't know what happens in radiology. So when back, they knew that they had a gap in the map that radiology had to fill in. So that was okay. It was okay not to have it complete because the plan was to go back to complete it anyway. So I hope I answered your question, but please reach out to me if you'd like a copy of the case study. My email's right there. You're more than welcome to have it.
Thank you, Beau. I know that I can personally say I've used that in my organization several times. I used probably the example that you're referring to and had them walk through a case study and understand how to do that. It really helped to engage the team and get them to understand how to create their own value stream map. So thank you.
And I'll just add to that. We actually did experiments early on, way back when value stream mapping was new. Is it faster to have them take time to draw a case study and then draw their own? Is that faster than actually have them start just with their case study? And we found out we saved an hour and a half of the day by having them invest 45 minutes up front. So seriously, we were very serious about figuring out if this was a better way. It's a way better way.
Thank you. Next question. I think, at the beginning, when you were talking about the hospital example, one of the lessons learned was engaging the leaders. So this individual is saying, how did you bring back leaders and team members when they did disengage?
We didn't have a problem with the teams disengaging for normal reasons. We had weird things happen, like a flood in the ER. So they couldn't, let me answer on 2 parts. First, the leaders. Once the leaders disengaged, we never got them back. We didn't have a vehicle to get them back. But some stayed engaged and even had their teams present to the boards every month because it was so cool. And others just got distracted on other stuff. And that was the reality of our first time out. That being said, if you think about 62 hospitals, from month to month, each hospital may struggle that month to complete the assignment. And so we saw people dragging themselves in saying, I didn't really have enough time to get all this stuff done. One hospital literally had a 6 inches of water one Saturday in the ER and had to tear everything out and move it upstairs. So there were things that happened. But the cool thing was, whenever they got to the cohort, they might be dragging, but other people didn't drag. So they were actually incented by, but the other teams could pull it off. We can too. So they come in the next month all on time with everything, and somebody else would be dragging. And then they would get incented because nobody else was. So the teams kind of kept themselves on track from falling behind. And that's a social dynamic I did not expect anywhere. But they're competitive enough to say, if they can do it, I can do it. It's very cool.
Thank you. Another question. Have you addressed a team or cohort that does not listen to each other? Have you dealt with that, and what have you done?
Yeah. Yeah. So this happened in another insurance company where the three teams were solving very different problems. They were from different departments solving different problems. And we started to notice when they were sharing that other people were tuning out and, playing with their phones or whatever. And so at first I couldn't understand that. And then they say, well, this doesn't really apply to me. I'm not learning anything. So I thought about it and I gave them assignments to report. So when one team was presenting, the other two teams had to take notes and report back. What did I learn? And from what they said, what might I be able to apply? So that kept them from drifting because they were put on point right after that team sat down. They were on. They had to respond. So so I knew it was good for them to gauge. They didn't know that. And the way I facilitated that was to keep them accountable to report on what they learned. So you can play on that, saying what questions you want to ask to keep them engaged. But that I had not seen that before. That was the first time, and that's how I addressed it.
Next question, thank you. What is the best way for small teams or small businesses to do the hypothesis testing you described in the hospital scenario?
Hypothesis testing. So hypothesis testing, you test a hypothesis by running an experiment. I'm being geeky with you because I'm trying to understand exactly what you're asking. So what's the best way for someone to run an experiment? Assuming that you're using cohorts, run through the process. But at the end of the process, you're actually running pilots or experiments to test the hypotheses of what you believe the future state to be. So the overall experiment is a hypothesis, and can I change differently? But inside that, you're actually looking at a specific process or area to redesign. And as you do that, you're trying to figure out what experiments do I need to run inside this specific project to test. So I don't know that I answered your question. I think I answered what I thought your question was.
Thank you. How do you make sure the cohort leader is hitting deadlines, makes time for the continuous improvement when they go back, to their own office or their field office? And then there's a statement, I assume you need buy-in from the manager.
Yeah. Well, that was actually a problem with the lawyers. When they first showed up, they thought this was just one meeting and they were out. That's all their bosses told them. Show up for a couple of days. And at the end, it said, well, here's your assignment. And they said, what do you mean assignment? I thought we were done. So what that really led to, we had to put the pause button on. It was a rough start. But we had to push the pause button. And then when I said that they actually had to put 20% of their time aside, I thought I was going to be thrown out of the room and stabbed by lawyers. So what they ended up doing was saying, listen, we understand what you're saying. We have no idea how to find 20%. Give us some time to do it. And they told management that, their bosses that. They said, we need time to put together a plan on how we're going to find 20%. So they took, I think it was around 4 weeks, and they presented, each office had a different plan on how they're going to find 20% because they had different things going on. And they showed a plan saying, this is how we're going to find 20%. And that's also something else they shared with their other cohorts saying, before you step into that room, you better have this plan because they're going to ask for 20%. So it actually was very helpful moving away in terms of how to find the 20%. So that's the plan. The plan doesn't always equal actual. So they might have a plan but fall down 1 month. But once again, they come back and others didn't fall down. So they're incented because lawyers were also very competitive to make sure they're on point next time. So the teams were helping each other stay on track. I didn't expect this, but I enjoyed it.
Another question, what what do you do, I guess, if you're too small for cohorts? Perhaps the organization is small and it's hard to put various teams together. Any suggestions for that?
Good question. If it's small, then scaling change shouldn't be a problem. But getting to the masses, there's no mass. So maybe you don't need this model at all. However, learning together is really cool. So one thing you might consider doing is doing it with another company. It was unusual for hospitals to get together and do this. We had 62 hospitals who weren't owned by the same people talking to each other. So you may be able to find a cohort of different small companies, and I think that would be fascinating because you'd be sharing ways to learn better. If you just do it by yourself, it's limited in terms of what you learn how to learn better. How do you learn how to learn better? So I would encourage you to reach out to somebody else and see if they might want to play too.
Good suggestion. One more question here. How long were I think 9 meetings with the A team members in the AR example? Can you describe this meeting more?
Yes. Let me think about it for a while. I have to sort back. So the agenda, first, share. So everyone we gave them 10 minutes. It actually took about 25 minutes. By the time they were all done, it was time for lunch, almost time for lunch, because there was a lot of talking amongst the teams about what was really going on. Then we had them redesign their socialization plan, because what they were really doing when they were sharing is they were talking about the trials and tribulations of socializing and how they learned to do better. So everybody had problems, and they were learning from others what else they might try. So we had them redesign the socialization plan for departure. And then we taught them something new, whatever the next learning segment was, and they practiced. And I believe, let me think about this. Yes, they did not stay overnight. That was a mandate. That's why we kept it by region, so they could drive to and from. So this was a one-day event. The legal office was multiple days because they flew in. So they stayed a couple of days and we did other things. We added other stuff to that agenda, and as a result, they didn't need 9 meetings.
Okay. One more. In COVID, where we cannot be in the same room and not allowed to travel for work, what are you doing for engagement online?
So we actually got some of this going with one of the insurance companies when they couldn't travel to the central location. We had them come in online and share. So if you think about what's necessary to do, it's necessary to teach them something, have them practice, and then have them share with others, and then have them come back and tell you about the sharing. I think each one of those elements can be done virtually, not as well as in person, but each one can be done virtually. You can teach them virtually if you're skilled at not just having PowerPoint in front of them for 8 hours. They can draw, they might be able to draw a map in different sections. If there's some scribe who's responsible for physically drawing the map and other people are telling them what to draw, they can send that around to others, to everyone who helped rather, and everyone who helped can then take it to their individual team and share that virtually, saying, this is what the team came up with. I think it's a lot clunkier. I really do. I also think it's possible. And what I'm excited about as a result of COVID and having us forced to be more virtual, I'm excited about what's really out there now, what resources are really out there now to help you facilitate better. I found a ton of resources I never knew about. And there are a lot of things out there that help you draw better. There's a collaborative whiteboard where you can all sit on there and draw the map on a single whiteboard. So I think there are opportunities out there. Let's see, I don't have the names of those places, but I can provide them when I send out a copy of these slides.
Thank you. I think we're all learning about how to use different tools and devices to do this virtually. So we are nearing the end. And again, thank you so much, Beau, for your time. A reminder that there will be another webinar again in June, second Wednesday of the month, noon Central Time. And you will receive your credits for this webinar in the next 24 hours. And again, we thank you very much, Beau, for your time and all the great information. I got lots of compliments in the question and answer box in regards to your presentation, and lots of good nuggets of knowledge for them to go forward with. So thank you.
Good luck.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.